Welcome back to Hopeful Horizon, where we bring you stories that touch the heart and open the mind. Today, we journey into the life of Malik Johnson, a young teen wrongly accused of a crime he didn't commit. In a school system that seems determined to silence him, Malik finds himself facing injustice alone, until he discovers a hidden ally and begins a fight to clear his name. As we follow Malik's path of courage and determination, we uncover deeper issues of favoritism, corruption, and the resilience needed to stand against it. If you enjoy stories with powerful messages, unexpected twists, and unforgettable moments, be sure to leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss an inspiring story from Hopeful Horizon. And let us know where you're tuning in from. We love hearing from our listeners around the world. Malik Johnson's day had started like any other. The early morning sun cast a pale glow through the worn curtains in his bedroom, barely warming the cool air. His room was small but filled with personality, sketches taped to the walls, books stacked by the bed, and a well-worn desk where his latest masterpiece lay half-finished. Malik had spent hours the night before sketching, losing track of time in the quiet world of charcoal and paper. Art was his refuge, a place he could retreat to when life felt too loud, too chaotic. He heard his mother in the kitchen, moving about quietly as she prepared breakfast. They lived in a modest two-bedroom apartment on the quieter side of town. His mom, a nurse, worked long hours to make ends meet. She was a strong woman, always putting on a brave face for Malik, but he noticed the weariness in her eyes, the strain she carried in her shoulders. Her gentle smiles and reassuring words were his anchor, even on the toughest days. "Malik, breakfast," she called, her voice warm but tired. He hurried to the kitchen, where a simple meal of scrambled eggs and toast awaited him. She sat across from him, sipping coffee, her eyes soft as she watched him eat. "Got anything special planned at school today?" she asked, a faint smile on her lips. Malik shrugged. "Not really, just another day." His mom reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Keep your head up, honey. You're gonna do great things." He smiled, appreciating her confidence in him, even if he didn't quite feel it himself. His art was the one place he felt like he belonged, a silent, unseen talent he nurtured in the shadows. At school, he mostly kept to himself, often sketching alone during lunch while other students grouped together, laughing and chatting. Being unnoticed was easier. It was safe. As he gathered his backpack and headed out the door, his mother's parting words followed him. "Remember, I'm proud of you, Malik. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Malik's school, Crestwood High, was a large building, sprawling with students from every walk of life. Kids from affluent families wearing the latest designer clothes, mixed with others who, like Malik, came from more modest backgrounds. Crestwood was known for its diversity, but also for the underlying tensions that came with it. The social divisions weren't obvious, but Malik could feel them, especially when he was singled out in subtle ways. A glance, a whisper, a dismissive shrug. During lunch, Malik found his usual spot at the back of the cafeteria, his sketchbook open in front of him. He was working on a drawing of a young woman's face, capturing the light in her eyes, the gentle curve of her smile. Lost in the lines, he tuned out the noise around him. Art was his world, a place where he had control. But the peace of his lunch break was shattered when a loud voice broke through his focus. "Johnson!" Malik looked up, startled, to see Principal Monroe standing at the cafeteria door, her sharp gaze fixed on him. The room fell silent as everyone turned to stare, their eyes wide with curiosity. "Come with me," she commanded, her tone leaving no room for argument. Malik's heart pounded as he closed his sketchbook and followed her through the hushed crowd. His mind raced, trying to figure out why he was being summoned. He couldn't remember doing anything wrong. In fact, he'd always tried to stay out of trouble, keep a low profile. He was a good student, respectful, and never one to challenge authority. The walk to the principal's office felt like a march toward judgment. Principal Monroe's heels clicked against the tiled floor, each step echoing ominously in the quiet hallway. Malik's stomach twisted with a sense of dread, his mind spinning with worry. When they reached her office, she gestured for him to sit down. Malik sat, his palms clammy as he waited. Principal Monroe sat across from him, her expression stern, lips pressed into a thin line. She looked down at a folder on her desk, flipping through papers without meeting his gaze. "Do you know why you're here, Malik?" she asked, her voice cold and unyielding. He shook his head, his voice barely above a whisper. "No, ma'am." She finally looked up, her eyes sharp, assessing. "Malik, I want you to think carefully before you answer me. Were you involved in any incidents in the gymnasium last night?" Confusion clouded his mind. I don't know what you're talking about." Principal Monroe's gaze hardened. "The gym was vandalized last night, Malik. Someone spray-painted the walls, wrote insults about me and other staff members. Do you have any idea who might be responsible?" Malik's mouth went dry as the weight of her words settled over him. Vandalism? He'd seen the gym on his way to class, noticed the crude graffiti, but it had never crossed his mind that someone might think he was responsible. "No, ma'am," he said, his voice shaking. "I had nothing to do with that." Principal Monroe leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "Several students said they saw someone who looked like you near the gym after hours. You're a talented artist, aren't you? You know how to use paint." Malik felt a surge of panic. Yes, he was an artist, but he'd never done anything like this. Art was his passion, his escape, not something he'd use to destroy. "I was home last night," he stammered. "I was working on a sketch. I don't know anything about the vandalism." She studied him for a long moment, her gaze unwavering. "Do you realize the severity of this, Malik? Vandalism is a serious offense. This school has a reputation to uphold, and we will not tolerate such behavior." Malik felt his pulse racing, his mind scrambling to understand how he had been dragged into this. He thought of his mother, her gentle voice, her unwavering pride in him. He couldn't let her down. He couldn't let her believe he'd done something like this. "Please, you have to believe me," he said, desperation creeping into his voice. "I didn't do it. I don't even know who would—" Principal Monroe cut him off with a raised hand. "Enough, Malik. We'll be conducting a thorough investigation, and if I find out you're lying, the consequences will be severe. You're dismissed." Malik stood, his knees weak as he made his way out of her office. The hallway felt colder, emptier, as if the walls themselves were closing in on him. He'd never felt so helpless, so trapped. A mixture of fear and anger bubbled inside him. How could they accuse him without any evidence? Was it just because he didn't fit in, because he was the quiet kid, the artist? As he walked down the hall, he caught glimpses of other students whispering, their eyes following him with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. He felt exposed, vulnerable. His sanctuary, the art room, the school halls, had suddenly become hostile territory. Malik clenched his fists, his mind racing with questions. Who had done this? And why were they so quick to point the finger at him? The injustice of it gnawed at him, fueling a determination he hadn't felt before. He knew he had to find out the truth, not just to clear his name, but to protect the one thing that mattered to him, his future, his art, his mother's pride. As he walked out of the school, his thoughts whirled with a single purpose, to uncover who was behind the vandalism and prove his innocence, no matter what it took. The accusations against Malik felt like a weight he couldn't shake. Everywhere he went, whispers trailed behind him, accusing glances cast his way by students he barely knew. Even his teachers seemed to look at him differently, their smiles replaced by tense expressions and silent judgments. He walked through the halls feeling like an outsider in a place he'd once found comfort. The principal's office had become an increasingly familiar place, and today he sat there once again, the walls pressing in on him as Principal Monroe slid a grainy black and white photo across the desk. His heart sank as he stared at the image. The figure in the footage was cloaked in shadows, only partially visible under the dim light of the hallway outside the gym. But there was no mistaking the dark jacket and baseball cap, the same jacket and cap Malik wore to school almost every day. "This is the evidence we needed, Malik," Principal Monroe said, her tone carrying a finality that made his stomach twist. "You might as well admit it now. The more you lie, the worse it will be for you." Malik's voice caught in his throat. He hadn't done it, and yet here was proof, staring back at him, a faceless figure that everyone seemed so certain was him. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. That's not me, Principal Monroe, he said, his voice steadier than he felt. I wasn't there last night. I swear. She folded her arms, her eyes narrowing as if she could see right through him. Then explain how that person is wearing your jacket and hat. Malik hesitated, his mind scrambling for the right words. I lent it to someone. I don't know who would have used it to do this, but I wasn't there. I let James borrow it yesterday after practice because he was cold. Principal Monroe raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. And why would James need to borrow your jacket when he has his own? You're grasping at straws, Malik. Just tell the truth. It's the truth. Malik's voice rose, the frustration and fear boiling over. He felt trapped, his words ignored, his side of the story dismissed. The principal's gaze hardened, and he could see the impatience on her face. Enough, she said sharply, her voice cutting through his pleas. I've given you a chance to come clean, Malik. But since you continue to insist on this absurd story, I have no choice but to proceed with disciplinary action. You're suspended, effective immediately, pending further investigation. Malik's heart sank, his fists clenching under the desk. He wanted to scream, to argue, to plead for someone to believe him, but he knew it would be useless. The evidence was too strong against him, and no one was willing to listen to his side. He stood up slowly, feeling the eyes of Principal Monroe following him as he left her office. The hallway felt colder than usual, each step echoing in the eerie silence. Students whispered as he passed, their voices a mix of curiosity and scorn. Some of them shot him looks of disdain. Others simply stared, watching the vandal make his way through the school. He kept his head down, feeling the weight of their judgment pressing on him with every step. When he reached his locker, he slumped against it, pressing his forehead against the cool metal. His thoughts whirled in a chaotic mix of anger, frustration, and desperation. How could he prove his innocence when the only proof they had pointed straight to him? His mind kept coming back to James, wondering if his friend had anything to do with this, or if maybe someone else had taken the jacket from him. But none of it made sense. Who would want to frame him, and why? As he fumbled with the lock, something fell from the small vent at the top of his locker door, fluttering to the ground. He stared at the small piece of paper, his brow furrowing in confusion. Bending down, he picked it up and unfolded it carefully, his heart skipping a beat as he read the words scrawled in hurried, messy handwriting. I know you didn't do it. Meet me in the library after school. A jolt of hope shot through him. Someone believed him. Someone knew he wasn't guilty. But who? His mind raced with questions, wondering if this was a trap or a lifeline. He looked around, scanning the hallway, but no one seemed to be paying him any particular attention. Whoever had left the note had done so anonymously, blending into the crowd like a ghost. The bell rang, signaling the end of the lunch period, and Malik found himself counting the hours until the end of the school day. Every class dragged on, the weight of his impending suspension looming over him. He could hardly focus, his mind spinning with thoughts of the note, the meeting in the library, and the tiny glimmer of hope it offered. Whoever had left the note might hold the answers he needed, the one chance he had to clear his name. When the final bell rang, Malik made his way to the library, his heart pounding in his chest. The vast room was nearly empty, only a few students lingering at tables or browsing the bookshelves. He glanced around, his eyes searching for any sign of the person who had left the note. Malik? A voice whispered from behind a bookshelf. He turned to see Janie Rivera peering out at him, her eyes wide and cautious. Janie was one of the quiet ones, a straight A student who mostly kept to herself. She was tech-savvy, known for her skill in coding and her interest in all things digital. Malik was surprised to see her here, though he didn't show it. Janie? Was it you who left the note? He asked, his voice low, tinged with both hope and suspicion. She nodded, glancing around to make sure no one was watching. Yeah, it was me. I couldn't let you go down for something you didn't do. Malik's eyes widened, relief flooding through him. So, you know I'm innocent. She nodded again, her expression serious. I saw the security footage too, Malik. I'm in the AV club, remember? We help monitor the cameras for events sometimes. I recognized the jacket, but it didn't look like you. The way the person moved, the way they carried themselves, it just didn't feel right. Then why doesn't anyone else believe that? He asked, his voice filled with frustration. I tried to tell Principal Monroe I wasn't there, that I lent my jacket to someone else, but she wouldn't listen. Janie glanced around again, her face tense. That's the thing, Malik. It's not just about the jacket. There's something else going on here, something bigger. I don't think this was just a random act of vandalism. What do you mean? Malik leaned in, curiosity and dread mingling in his chest. She hesitated, her voice dropping to a whisper. There's been talk in the AV club. Some of the upperclassmen have been complaining about changes the principal has been making, cutting budgets for the arts, pushing for more funding towards sports, and, well, a few people aren't happy about it. I think someone's trying to make a statement, and they used your jacket to do it. Malik felt a surge of anger. So this wasn't just about him. It was about using him as a scapegoat in a bigger game. But why me? I didn't do anything to anyone. I just want to keep my head down and draw. Why'd they have to pull me into this? Janie met his gaze, her expression serious. Because you're an easy target, Malik. You keep to yourself, you're quiet, and you don't have a lot of people standing up for you. They knew no one would question it if they pinned it on you. Malik clenched his fists, his mind spinning with anger and disbelief. He wanted to scream, to storm into the principal's office and demand that she see the truth. But he knew it wouldn't make a difference. He needed proof, something solid, something undeniable. Can you help me? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Janie looked at him, her eyes thoughtful, calculating. I think I can. If we can access the original footage, we might be able to analyze it and see if there's any way to identify the person. But it's not going to be easy. The school's security system is locked down pretty tight. We'll have to be careful. A spark of hope flickered in Malik's chest. He had an ally now, someone who believed him and was willing to help. Together, maybe they could unravel the truth and expose the real culprit. Thank you, Janie, he said, his voice filled with gratitude. She gave him a small smile, determination gleaming in her eyes. Don't thank me yet. We've got a lot of work to do, and this isn't going to be easy, but we're going to find out who did this, Malik. We're going to prove you're innocent. As they left the library, a plan began to take shape, a daring, risky plan that would test their courage and push them to the limits. Malik didn't know what lay ahead, but for the first time since this nightmare began, he felt a glimmer of hope. The library was dimly lit, the only sound being the quiet hum of the overhead lights and the distant rustle of pages being turned by a few scattered students. Malik sat across from Janie, his heart racing as she carefully connected her laptop to a small flash drive. Janie's tech skills were already becoming clear. She tapped a few keys, her eyes darting across the screen as she pulled up the security footage from the gym on the night of the vandalism. Malik watched in awe, realizing she had access to files most students couldn't even dream of reaching. Janie adjusted her glasses and leaned in. Okay, here's the footage from that night. Pay attention, she murmured, her voice low. They both leaned closer, eyes fixed on the screen. At first, all they saw was the empty gym, dimly illuminated by a single emergency light near the entrance. Minutes ticked by, and then a shadow. A figure slipped into view, moving quickly and with purpose. Malik's heart raced as he noticed the dark jacket and hat similar to his own, but Janie paused the video and zoomed in. That's not you, she said confidently. Look at the posture. This guy's broader. And see the shoes? Those are athletic cleats, not your style. Relief washed over Malik, mixed with anger. He couldn't believe someone would go this far to frame him. Who would do this? He stammered. Janie smirked and tapped the keyboard, zooming in further. The figure turned slightly, just enough for a flash of their face to be visible under the low light. Malik recognized the face immediately. Tyler Saunders, the star quarterback, and one of the most popular students in school. Tyler? Malik's voice was barely a whisper. Why would he do this? Janie shrugged, though a grim expression crossed her face. He's got influence, Malik, and he's used to getting away with things. My guess, he doesn't think anyone would dare question him. Malik's mind raced. Tyler was not only admired, but practically worshipped by most of the student body. If he was involved, that meant there was more to this than simple vandalism. Janie turned off the laptop, her face serious. We're going to have to be careful. Tyler's got friends, and they'll protect him if they find out what we're doing." The weight of the situation pressed on Malik, but he felt a newfound determination. This wasn't just about clearing his name anymore. It was about exposing a system that protected certain students while leaving others like him to fend for themselves. He nodded to Janie. "Let's find the proof we need." Over the next few days, Malik and Janie moved cautiously, their investigation inching forward as they pieced together Tyler's involvement. They discovered that Tyler had a reputation for bending the rules. Rumors floated through the school about parties he'd thrown, property he'd damaged, and teachers he'd charmed or intimidated into silence. But the more Malik and Janie dug, the clearer it became that Tyler's influence went beyond his social circle. There were rumors about Principal Monroe herself, whispers of a close connection between her and Tyler's family. Malik began to understand why his own pleas had fallen on deaf ears. One afternoon, while Malik was putting away his sketchbook after lunch, two of Tyler's friends cornered him. A tall, muscular guy named Brent stepped forward, his arms crossed, his expression cold. "Hey, Malik," Brent said, voice dripping with sarcasm. "I heard you've been sticking your nose where it doesn't belong." Malik's heart pounded, but he stood his ground. "I don't know what you're talking about." Brent smirked, a dangerous glint in his eye. "You'd better watch yourself, or you'll find yourself in even deeper trouble. No one likes a snitch." Janie, who had been watching from a distance, walked over and stood beside Malik, her gaze unwavering. "Back off, Brent," she said, her voice calm but firm. Brent's smile faltered for a moment before he shrugged. "Suit yourself, but don't say we didn't warn you." As Brent and his friends walked away, Malik felt a surge of gratitude for Janie's bravery. She gave him a reassuring nod, but he could see the worry in her eyes. They were getting closer to the truth, and it was only making things more dangerous. That evening, they met in the library again, both of them determined yet apprehensive. Janie had uncovered more than just rumors. She'd found evidence linking Tyler to other questionable activities, including allegations of cheating and even accusations of bullying that had somehow disappeared from his record. "This isn't just about the vandalism," Janie said, her eyes blazing. "This is about a culture that lets people like Tyler get away with anything." Malik nodded, feeling the weight of what they were doing. "Then, let's make sure they can't hide anymore." The next day, Malik couldn't take it anymore. He marched straight to Principal Monroe's office, ignoring the stares and whispers around him. Janie was close behind, holding a folder filled with the evidence they'd gathered. Principal Monroe looked up as they entered, her face hardening. "Malik, I thought I made myself clear. You are suspended." Malik took a deep breath, trying to keep his voice steady. "Principal Monroe, I didn't do it. We have evidence that Tyler Saunders was the one in the footage. I want you to look at it." Principal Monroe's eyes narrowed. "This is ridiculous. Tyler is an exemplary student. Do you really think you can just waltz in here and accuse him?" Janie stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "With all due respect, Principal Monroe, this isn't just an accusation. We have security footage and records showing Tyler's involvement in multiple incidents." The principal's face flushed, and she looked away for a moment before regaining her composure. "Even if this were true, I will not tolerate this kind of insubordination. Tyler is a valued student here. Malik, if you continue with these accusations, there will be severe consequences." Malik felt a surge of anger. This was the woman who was supposed to protect students, who was supposed to be fair, but she was willing to ignore the truth just to protect her favorite. "So, you're just going to let him get away with this?" he demanded. Principal Monroe's gaze hardened. "I'm telling you to drop this, Malik. Go home. Consider this your final warning." As Malik left her office, he felt a wave of hopelessness wash over him. But then he glanced at Janie, who gave him a determined nod. They weren't going to give up. They would find another way. The final showdown took place in the school board office, where Malik and Janie presented their evidence to the district superintendent and the school board members. Malik's hands trembled as he held up the folder, feeling the weight of his own words. "We have proof," he said, voice trembling but strong. "Tyler was the one who vandalized the gym, and there's evidence showing Principal Monroe has been covering up his actions." Janie stepped forward, adding in details about the footage and the suspiciously erased records. The board members exchanged glances, their expressions growing serious as they flipped through the documents. The superintendent turned to Principal Monroe, who stood at the edge of the room, her face pale. "Principal Monroe, do you have an explanation for this?" Principal Monroe stammered, her eyes darting to Tyler, who sat with his parents looking stunned and angry. I was only doing what I thought was best for the school. Tyler's family is very generous." The room fell silent as her words sank in. Malik felt a surge of satisfaction as the board members exchanged grave nods. They had seen the truth, and they couldn't ignore it any longer. The superintendent cleared his throat. "Thank you, Malik. Thank you, Janie. This matter will be thoroughly investigated, and appropriate actions will be taken. Principal Monroe, your conduct is deeply concerning, and we will be discussing this further." With those words, Malik felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He looked at Janie, who smiled, and they shared a moment of triumph. They had done it. They had cleared his name, and more importantly, they had exposed the truth. In the days that followed, Tyler was held accountable for his actions, and Principal Monroe was replaced. The school's policies were reviewed, and new measures were put in place to ensure that every student's voice would be heard. Malik returned to school, no longer seen as a suspect, but as a hero who had fought for justice. And as he walked through the halls, his head held high, he knew he wasn't alone. He had friends who believed in him, and he had proven that the truth could triumph, even against the odds. Thank you for joining us on Malik's journey of truth, courage, and resilience. His story reminds us that standing up to injustice is never easy, but sometimes it's the only way to spark real change. It's about finding strength even when the world seems against you and pushing forward until the truth comes to light. If this story moved you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. And remember to hit that subscribe button and tap the bell so you never miss another story from Hopeful Horizon. We'll be back soon with more tales that inspire, challenge, and leave a lasting impact. Thank you for being part of our community. Until next time, stay hopeful, stay strong, and keep believing in the power of truth.